Step 4. Plan like a general. As a student, your goal should be to never have to say, "Holy banana pancakes, I totally forgot about that assignment." College life is a complicated maelstrom of activities, assignments, projects, events, and spontaneous trips to the grocery store at 2 a.m. so you can score free boxes to make cardboard battle armor out of. Without a good planning system, things will fall through the cracks. This chapter is all about helping you form that planning system and build the habits that'll keep it running smoothly. It's also about helping you be more productive, and here's why. Planning mode versus robot mode. As a student, you're not often forced to do specific things at specific times. You have a lot of choice in any given moment. Jorgen von Strangle, the toughest fairy in the universe, is not standing behind you in preparation to put his boot up your rear every time you have to study. And that's a pity, because it's often exactly what you need. Your freedom of choice is one of the most devious culprits in the sabotage of your productivity. Sheena Iyengar, a professor at Columbia Business School, has done a lot of research into the topic of choice. Here's a quote from her that summarizes a lot of her work. "There are times when the presence of more choices can make us choose things that are not good for us. For me, the clearest example is that the more retirement fund options a person has, the less likely they are to save for their old age." With a bit of thought, this actually makes quite a bit of sense. A lot of people never start investing because they feel there are just too many options and they're afraid of picking the wrong one. Ironically and tragically, the most wrong option is usually waiting too long to invest. As a student, you probably have this problem as well. The only difference is that you're worried about marginal opportunity costs instead of marginal financial returns. You wonder which homework assignment you should tackle first, which class you should study for now, and which to save for later, etc. A successful student doesn't spend very much time on this problem at all because they know how to effectively split their time between their planning mode and their doing mode, which I like to call robot mode instead. The word robot actually comes from the Czech word robotnik, which directly translates to worker or slave. Workers and slaves do not typically take care of the planning aspects of a project. However, when motivated properly, they do get down to business and get stuff done. Logically, this means that you want to be in robot mode as much as you possibly can during your work sessions. Steps 7 and 8 will go into detail on how to upgrade yourself to be a better robot. But in this step, we'll talk about how to utilize planning mode effectively so you don't have to spend much time in it. In short, the best way to do this is to get your planning done up front. Plan out your entire education. While most of this chapter is about weekly, in the trenches planning, I want to mention the importance of having a plan for your entire education. Doing this really pays off. As a freshman, I created an Excel spreadsheet that mapped out all the classes I would take over the following 8 semesters. Note: want to download this template to use as a guide for your own graduation plan? It's available right in the subscriber toolbox where you downloaded this book. To do this, I spent a few hours going over all the requirements sheets relevant to my major, the core MIS curriculum, general business requirements, electives, and gen ads, etc. I made sure I knew how many credits I'd need to graduate, how many of those needed to be 300 level or higher, etc. Then, I created a column for every semester and listed all the classes I would take, being careful to make sure all the requirements for my major were planned for. I also used Excel formulas to create dynamic credit totals, so my sheet would still work if I changed plans later on. Doing that really came in handy because I did change plans several times. I ended up changing electives based on new interests I gained, changing the order of certain classes I took, and dropping a program that no longer benefited me. Each time I changed plans, I always made sure to update the spreadsheet. Doing this ensured that I always knew what my overall graduation plan was. It also kept me mindful of when I could sign up for classes, which I did as early as possible each semester. Plan your week on Sunday. Sunday should be your planning day. You can go ahead and pick another day if you want, but if you do, we totally can't be friends. Okay, we can, but only if you can beat me in a DDR battle, which you won't. Hashtag, come at me, bro. Seriously though, you should find a day of the week that you use for planning. Sunday is a prime choice because it's right before you get back into the swing of things for the week. Luckily, this process shouldn't take you much time. Chapter 6 covers techniques on staying organized and capturing data intelligently. So if you follow the advice there, you'll have an organized planning system that doesn't require much management. On this planning day, you'll look at your task management system and make a mental note of everything you need to achieve during the week. You'll probably have academic tasks, reading assignments, homework, exam studying, group project work, and you'll also have non-academic tasks. Examples? Getting your resume reviewed, writing a cover letter for a job, setting up a meeting with your advisor, buying a new notebook from the bookstore, filling out your FAFSA, hitting the gym. Do you even lift? In addition, you'll probably have events with specific start and end times beyond your classes, job shifts, group meetings, etc. Make sure these are all on your calendar. Now that you know all that you need to get done during the week, you can move on to the next step of planning, grouping your tasks by context. Understand task contexts. When it comes to managing your work, there are only two contexts that you need to concern yourself with: high thought intensity work, low thought intensity work. Work that requires lots of brain power, reading, research, writing, creative projects, doing heavy math is one of the high thought intensity variety. Here's the thing about work of this type. It requires long, uninterrupted stretches of focused work to be done properly. If you're trying to write a big research paper in little 20-minute spurts between classes, you're not going to do as good of a job. When you give highly thought-intense projects the time and attention they deserve, you're much more likely to find yourself in the flow state while working on them. That mental state of Zen-like focus, where time seems to melt away and you create your best work. Thinking about your tasks in terms of their contexts helps you get into that flow state more because you can batch low-intensity tasks. By planning ahead, you can block off a few concentrated hours to take care of all these easier tasks, leaving longer time periods open for the focused, high-intensity work that's more valuable to you in the long run. Another thing to note here, when planning, try to review your past performance at certain times of the day. Do you do your best work in the early morning, late at night, right after class ends? When you know yourself, you can plan for optimum effectiveness. If you know you're focused in the early morning, you can choose to schedule your class, work, and social engagements later in the day. You can also take care of your batched low-intensity tasks later on as well, leaving the early mornings open for even more focused work. Create a daily plan. Planning your week out on Sunday, or whatever day you choose, gives you a solid, high-level view of how that week is going to go. It allows you to make sure you're on top of any upcoming events and reduces the chance you'll get blindsided by something. However, at least in my experience, you can't plan everything out on a Sunday. You'll run out of clean pants on Wednesday and realize you need to do laundry the next day. A friend's car will break down in the Target parking lot and they'll need you to come give them a jump. Things will come up unexpectedly, and you'll inevitably realize that there were already tasks lurking in the darkness that you didn't see on Sunday. That's why I think you should create a daily plan as well. You can either do this first thing in the morning or the night before. Either way, it's a good thing to turn into a solid habit. I have my reminder to do so listed in Ibitica as part of my morning routine, but in truth, I often sketch it out right before I go to bed at night. Here's how I create mine. Each night, I'll stand in front of the whiteboard in my room. I look at my two main time management apps, Google Calendar for events and the content I need to create. I keep it planned out there. Todoist for individual tasks. Once I've done that, I'll write down a list of tasks on the whiteboard that need to be done the next day. A lot of productivity experts will tell you that your daily list should have no more than 2 to 3 tasks on it. Otherwise, you're at risk to overwhelm yourself and end up getting nothing done. If I'm being honest, my daily list usually has 6 to 10 items on it. And the reason for that is because I am a heartless, soulless robot who works pretty much all the time. Okay, it's not that bad, but I do start things at 6 a.m. each day and usually don't finish until 6 p.m. or later, depending on how busy the week is. However, I do have a couple of hacks in place to deal with my many tasks which you can take advantage of. Firstly, I try to prioritize my daily list by putting the most important tasks at the top of it. On most days, I don't actually finish the whole list, though I do try my damnedest. By putting the most important tasks first, I'm able to get the best results possible, even though I'm not reaching 100% list completion. There's a great analogy I've heard from several different sources that speaks to the wisdom in prioritizing, and it goes something like this. A professor has a giant glass jar in front of him, and surrounding it are 4 buckets holding 4 different materials: big rocks, pebbles, sand, and water. I'll spare you the less relevant part of the story, where he does things wrong to bolster the illustration. The ultimate point is that by putting the big rocks in first and then moving on to the next biggest material, the professor was able to fit all 4 materials nicely in the jar. When the big rocks are put in first, the gaps they create are easily filled by pebbles, which in turn leave gaps perfect for sand, and so on. This analogy applies perfectly to the real world. Take care of the important things first, and you'll get the best results. What's important? Think about your tasks in terms of what will get you closest to achieving your goals, what will prevent your life from spiraling into utter chaos, destruction, and the rise of Beelzebub himself, what will require the most willpower to complete. That third one, willpower, is an especially crucial consideration, as willpower is a finite resource. There are things you can do over the long term to get more, and over the short term to get the most out of your current store, but it is limited. Don't waste it on unimportant tasks. As the day wears on, you'll come to find you're unwilling to do the things that actually matter. Remember, big rocks. Secondly, I attempt to estimate the amount of time I'll take to complete each task accurately. See the section on the fudge ratio below. I then add up all the estimates and come up with the total time commitment for the list, which I'll write at the bottom. Since I typically start my work each day around 8 a.m. after doing my 2-hour morning routine, see the section on that in step 7, I'll use that total time estimate to come up with an end goal for my workday. Doing this helps to externalize my motivation to complete my work by creating time pressure that exists outside of my brain. It's not as motivating as a hard deadline, like a due date on a paper, but it helps keep me from working in ultra-long, unfocused stretches. Try time boxing. My time estimating strategy for my daily plans that I just went over works well for me, but sometimes you want to go a step further. Enter time boxing. This means actually scheduling specific blocks of time for each task on your daily list. Time boxing is the closest you can get to becoming your own slave-driving asshole of a boss. But it can be effective if you're able to estimate your time blocks well and then stick to the schedule. I actually tested out time boxing during a week in the fall. Instead of creating a single day task list though, I time boxed my entire week. Doing this was the ultimate way of separating planning mode and robot mode. When I finished planning and started going through the time boxes, I already had almost every choice made for me. I knew exactly what to do, the order in which I needed to do it, and how long each task should take. You can use time boxing in multiple ways. In fact, you don't have to apply it to your entire daily plan. Instead, you can simply try using it on one particular project that you know you've been procrastinating on. By setting a time box, you'll create some time pressure that'll help motivate you to work more quickly. You can also use time boxing when you're faced with a project for which you're not feeling a whole lot of clear direction. When you don't know what to do and you're paralyzed because of it, creating a time box can motivate you to spend that time at least trying to make some progress. Know thy fudge ratio. Humans are really bad at accurately predicting how long it will take to do things, and this is due to something called the planning fallacy. This is a phenomenon in which people's estimate for the time needed to complete a task show optimistic bias. In short, people almost always underestimate the time needed to get something done. Here's an illustration. In 1995, a Canadian professor of psychology named Roger Buehler asked the students when they thought they'd be able to complete homework and other tasks. Bueller actually asked for probabilities. Specifically, he wanted to know when students thought it was 50% probable they'd have their projects done, and also when they'd up that to 75% and 99%. The results? 13% finished their work by the time they were 50% sure about. 19% finished at their 75% probability estimates. 45% finished before the time they were 99% sure they'd be done at. That last one is the most interesting. Less than half of the students finished their work in the time they were 99% sure it would take. They tried to make an extremely conservative estimate, and most were still wrong. Another psychologist named Ian Newby Clark discovered the root of the problem in his own studies. He asked research participants for time estimates based on both realistic best guess cases, hopeful everything goes right best case scenarios. As it turns out, people's estimates in both cases were virtually identical. The key finding here: when people try to come up with a realistic best guess time estimate, their brains actually consider the best case. We are very bad at taking unpredictable setbacks and delays into account when making time estimates. There's actually a good way of accounting for this problem, unlike many other cognitive biases, and that's to base your prediction on a broad view of the task, rather than all the individual components. When you do this, you can compare it to similar tasks that have already been completed in the real world, and make your estimate based on the amount of time those tasks actually took. As you do more and more work, you'll have more and more data to pull from when doing this. However, there's another effective trick you can use in making time estimates called the fudge ratio. This term was coined by the personal development blogger Steve Pavlina, but it harkens back to a concept thought up by Douglas Hofstadter, the author of what is potentially the most daunting book on my shelf, Gödel, Escher, Bach, An Eternal Golden Braid. Hofstadter's law, aptly named, states, "It always takes longer than you expect, even when you take into account Hofstadter's law." Hofstadter came up with this law in reference to how long it was taking to develop computers that could become world chess champions. The book was written in 1979, but it applies to a lot of the projects we humans take on. Pavlina's fudge ratio acknowledges the planning fallacy and offers up a simple process for fixing it. Number 1, write down a list of tasks you need to do. Number 2, put an off-the-cuff time estimate on each one. Number 3, as you finish tasks, write down the actual amount of time they took. Number 4, divide the actual task time by your estimate to get your fudge ratio. So, for example, say you estimated that it would take you 45 minutes to finish a study guide for your history class. In reality, it takes you 1 hour and 15 minutes. Using math that I learned in 3rd grade when I wasn't thinking about Batman, I can calculate the ratio. 75 minutes divided by 45 minutes equals 1.67. Now you know your fudge ratio is 1.67, which means that the next time you need to predict how long it'll take you to finish a similar task, you should multiply your initial prediction by 1.67. Over time, you won't need to do the math anymore. You just get better at making accurate time estimates. In fact, I never did the math. As a student, I started trying to make better predictions before I ever heard about the fudge ratio, and the way I did it was to simply try to be mindful of how long it took me to get things done. I also try to predict potential setbacks, distractions, and other things that might derail me from the best case scenario. If you do this, your estimates won't always be perfect, but they'll be a heck of a lot better than the estimates of most other people. Use the Captain America method to break down projects. Planning shouldn't stop at the weekly or daily level. Individual projects should be broken into steps and prioritized as well. And your goal here should be to create a list of steps that are actionable. Hypothetical example. Study for calculus final isn't a good task. It doesn't implicitly tell you exactly what to do. So it should be broken up into action steps that a robot could do, like set up study area and download practice problem set from Blackboard. Review chapter on L'Hôpital's rule in textbook and take summarized notes. Work through problem set. I call this the Captain America method because I like superheroes and shaky metaphors. Captain America was able to break a large-scale alien invasion down into components and direct his resources, the Avengers, to each portion. Similarly, you should be able to break up your tasks and devote your resources, blocks of time, to each step. Here's a couple of examples from my own work. Answering 97 emails in one day. I get a lot of email, and I normally try to stay on top of it. Between questions from readers, partnership opportunities, old web design clients, and everything else, I probably get 20 to 30 emails that require action every day. During the early fall of 2014, I spent quite a bit of time traveling to conferences and other events. As a result, the emails piled up to levels that weren't easy to clear out in a day, so I just neglected them entirely. My negligence eventually culminated in an inbox that held 97 unanswered emails. Since I delete everything that isn't important every day, each of these emails that remained in the inbox required some sort of action, essentially leaving me with a 97-item to-do list. Day after day, I tell myself, today the day I'll answer them all. I call this the Hulk method, as I was simply trying to brute force the task. It didn't work. Day after day, I try to tackle my inbox, realize how big the task was, and inevitably go do something else. Then, one day, I decided to draw out a specific plan detailing exactly how I tackle my emails. I categorized each message, then created steps based on which messages were of the highest priority. Then, I forced myself to go through my inbox in the exact order the steps dictated. Doing this worked. I finished answering all 97 emails within 24 hours. This is the day I came up with the Captain America method, because it was what I was doing. Breaking down my task and planning out how I'd devote my resources to it. Creating crap tons of BRoll. For each of the videos I make for my YouTube channel, I have to create BRoll. All the graphics, animations, and other things that go over the main footage of me talking. Without BRoll, the videos would be much less interesting. However, creating it is a lot of work. It's a messy process that takes a really long time to do. So, in order to keep my mind focused, I created this list for my video on active reading. Look at the legend at the top. I've broken this list of 20-something BRoll items down into contexts. Some are just text, some are graphics, and some are full-blown animations. They're also written in the order that they appear in the video. Lastly, the 2 columns of check marks let me track my progress on both creating the BRoll in Photoshop and including it in my Premiere Pro video project. With this list in hand, I was able to go down the line on a per context basis. First, I created almost everything in Photoshop, and then I moved on to Premiere. This was a lot more efficient than switching between the two for each item.